Good morning, everyone. Lots of news from yesterday. The committee that met and questioned Mr. Morneau, and there was questions for Canada Land authors. There were questions for all sorts of people people who were working within We, and it was really, really a disaster for the finance minister and for We. And the revelations that came out yesterday, We Charity wasn't the entity that the $900 million was going to. That was going to be We Charity Foundation, which is something else, which is a real estate holding company. Isn't that wild? Like, that by itself is a big bombshell. But the revelations that come out from the questioning are terrible for the finance minister. So we're going to look at that. But first, I wanted to show you this. I thought this was funny. It's if Twitter had a wall of shame, who would you nominate? Christia, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, or former Climate Minister Catherine Lifestyle Photo McKenna, right? Why does this continue to happen? Why does Mr. Trudeau continue to take pictures uncomfortably close to people? I think I saw a picture of him hugging Jody Wilson-Raybould or grabbing Minister McKenna and ha ha, right? He was making a smiley face at them, but it seemed really aggressive and just kind of like something that would be out of place in the corporate world, right? Like, you wouldn't, and like I think I said at the time, you wouldn't do that. Oh, McKenna said one day that she came in and she laid down on Justin Trudeau's floor because the negotiations for the USMCA were so taxing. And I was like, what would happen if like that was Carl instead of Christia Freeland, and like your coworker Carl, or your colleague, your minister colleague Carl came in and laid down on the floor? Would you be like, oh yeah, this is totally normal? Or would you be like, hey Carl, are you okay? It's an odd thing, like an odd anecdote for the deputy prime minister at the time. She was foreign minister, to relay an anecdote that casts her in that kind of light. It's a very odd reaction to stressful negotiations, and these are very odd pictures. He's got odd pictures with Macron as well. Okay, I've wasted too much time on that. Sorry about that, everyone. Let's get into the actual news about yesterday, about what happened. Revelations that the finance minister broke ethics laws, like flagrantly, which is, I like this government. Sure. They believe in their own good intentions so much that laws just get in the way. They've got good to do. I think that's how they think about things. Okay, here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says, the Prime Minister has accepted my invitation to testify at Finance Committee. He must swear an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Right, but if he just doesn't answer the question, I'm expecting the answers from Mr. Trudeau to be, we worked hard for all Canadians, we did our best, we tried really hard, our intentions were really good. I think that's all we're going to see. It'll be the same thing. And, I'm sorry for my error in judgment. All the same garbage that skated him through the last ethics thing. Although this is a big one, and I'm going to show you some comparisons to what Mr. Morneau did, what Mr. Trudeau did by extension, and directly, and compare it to the Duffy and the Miss Oda. That's Duffy. Here it is. Bev Oda. So we're going to compare all that stuff. I think that's interesting to look back at what's happened and what's happening currently. So here's a recap. Stuart Bell, and Stuart Bell is an investigative journalist at Global News. He says, when the Prime Minister announced his controversial $912 million student volunteer program, he said We Charity had been contracted to administer it. And he links to his own proof here. Link to this thread is in the description if you want to check it out. And it says clearly We Charity. But government and charity officials told Global News the contract was actually with We Charity Foundation. What is We Charity Foundation? It was set up in 2018 by 3 We Charity executives and shares an address and phone number with We Charity, but told the Canada Revenue Agency it was not a branch or division of any other charity. Despite the overlaps, it is a separate charity. According to CRA papers released to Global News, We Charity Foundation was created to hold real estate for We Charity. That's Schedule A. And there's this link. It says to hold real estate for the use and benefit of We Charity. But following the start of talks with the government over the CSSG, it amended its charitable purpose to include promoting volunteering, which is aligned with the CSSG. Right, to promote public participation with volunteering. We Charity said We Charity Foundation was made the contracting party for legal liability reasons. And here's the the response. 7, how a charity that only received federal charitable status last year with a founding purpose to hold real estate reported a budget of just $150,000 and had no track record became the vehicle for the CSSG's $912 million program could raise new questions for Trudeau. And yeah, these are all good points and all things that have happened. And when if Trudeau's misrepresenting and lying to people, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. He should know what charities are being engaged, right? Back to this. Pierre Poilievre recap. Morneau Trudeau gave $912 million contribution to the real estate holding arm of a group that had paid Trudeau's family $300,000 and gave Morneau's daughter a job and his family $41,000 in illegal travel expenses. That's just what we know so far. Okay, and here's more. Morneau confirms that he awarded a $3 million grant to We organization the same month his daughter was hired by We. Are we at $16 orange juice levels of media outrage yet? Right? And this is in response to the CBC Politics Finance Minister Bill Morneau said he today repaid We organization $41,000 for expenses related to a 2017 We trip with his family and apologized to MPs looking into the government's contract with We to administer student volunteer grants. I mean, it's all so convenient. Lucky he had that $41,000 laying around. Eh? Do you have $41,000 laying around to repay a $100,000 trip that you went on in 2017? Yeah, right. Here's Miss Walsh, and she's a political reporter for Globe and Mail, and she says, We Charity says the trips the Morneau family took were complimentary. Today, Bill Morneau told the Finance Committee he was completely surprised that the expenses hadn't been charged to him. Part of the statement from We is below, the full statement here, and it says, we're going to look at this in just a minute. We'll look at, this is the reporting on this. And basically it says, yesterday the Morneau McCain family reached out to us to ask if in fact the trip had been complimentary. We confirmed that it was. And then they reimbursed the We Charity for what they would have been charged if they had paid at the time, $4,395 per person. So that's $41,000. I thought he said his wife, his daughter, and himself, and that was it. $41,000. That's a big inflation. Here is Mr. Charlie Angus. He's an NDP MP, and this is an exchange about the Ethics Act, the Conflict of Interest Act. I'll play the clip. Hold on just a second. My mouse is acting up, and I don't know why. It's quite bothersome. Okay, here we go.
Was a mistake on my part.
Mr. Angus.
Have you read the Conflict of Interest Act?
Mr. Minister?
Mr. Chair, I believe when I first came into office, I would have had access to all of those acts.
So you're not familiar with it. The fact that you just remembered that we paid $41,000 for you to do travel. Are you not aware that under the Conflict of Interest Act, Sections 11, Section 12, Section 15 of the Code are explicit? And it's also explicit about the ministers are not to be getting paid travel. So if you don't really remember the Conflict of Interest Act, you remember the Aga Khan ruling by the Ethics Commissioner, because it seems that he made direct rulings about a situation that you are now in. Isn't there someone in your office who would tell you, come on, Minister, these are the rules. This is the law of the land. It applies to you as well.
And I really do think that the Liberals are so blinded by their good intentions that they don't even consider that the law may stop them from having these vacations and other lavish items bestowed to them from, charities that they're giving hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to, right? Here's Pierre Poilievre carrying on. Morneau claims he did not know that we gave him $41,000 in wine, meals, accommodation, travel, and other benefits on his executive Ecuadorian vacation. Who did he think was paying for it all? Did he think the luxuries fell on him from the sky? So here's Andrew Scheer, current leader, and I have this leadership contest for this party is going on forever. I thought it was supposed to be done by June, wasn't it? It's like June 11th supposed to be finished. Anyway, here's the still current leader of the CPC, and here's what he says. Go.
Completely unacceptable it's just outrageous. It's completely unacceptable for a finance minister, for any minister, to accept illegal trips, which is what Mr. Morneau seems to have done, and only paid the money back on the day that he was scheduled to testify. So we believe it's time for Bill Morneau to resign.
Yeah, and it's not just Mr. Scheer. Excuse me, not just Mr. Scheer who thinks it's time for Mr. Morneau to resign. This is Mr. Morneau giving the how it happened of the 2017 trip. I'm not going to play it, but this is when he says that he just wrote a check yesterday because it was an error. It would be like Justin Trudeau writing a check the day before the Aga Khan election thing blew up, and like, oh, well, not even, right? Like, there's ethics laws for a reason, and they've been broken kind of flagrantly here. And again, my mouse is being troublesome, so I apologize. I was going to bring this up now in the show, but I've already talked about this, but it's still notable that Morneau just paid yesterday, right? Like, that's or the day before. Here is Pierre Poilievre asking a very pointed question, and then I've got one more where the Ethics Committee actually gives 48 hours for Morneau to resign.
Go ahead, Mr. Minister.
As I said, I did not know that there were expenses that were not charged to me, but I'm not making an excuse. It was my mistake not to have taken responsibility to ensure that those expenses were paid. And I found that out only with a thorough review of my records over the course of the last few days. And that is absolutely a mistake on my behalf. I've then turned around to reimburse,
Chair,
which I know is important.
Chair.
And I will
Minister
continue.
Still has time.
I
Go ahead.
will continue to work on behalf of Canadians. I want to put this in context, the program that we were trying to deliver.
And so this is back to the talking points, right? Like, as soon as you can get the question answered quickly, and then you finish up your time with, we were trying to help Canadians. But in fact, he was helping himself, right? To lavish vacations. When's the last time you spent that much money on vacation for yourself? Here is the Finance Committee asking for Minister Morneau's resignation, and I'm going to cue it up. Okay, I'll just play it from the start. Here we go.
Whereas the Minister of Finance has accepted $41,000 in illegal travel expenses, and that the Minister of Finance is in flagrant breach of multiple sections of the Conflict of Interest Act, including but not limited to sections 6, 11, and 21, in addition to prior violations, that the Standing Committee on Finance hereby call on the Minister to immediately resign.
So you were you're given the 48-hour notice, okay?
Yes.
Thank you for that. That notice is given.
So this is serious, as far as I can tell. Very serious, right? And let's compare to some quick scandals of yore. Okay, this is the Bev Oda scandal, and during her tenure as International Cooperation Minister, when she was responsible for the Canadian International Development Agency, or CIDA, Ms. Oda made headlines for lavish spending while traveling on government business. She was forced to repay taxes for $1,000 a day in limousine expenses, a pricey stay in London's Savoy Hotel in 2011, and for a $16 glass of orange juice. In an interview with Tuesday with CBC's Power and Politics, Miss Oda said she had no regrets about ordering the juice, although she acknowledged that she should not have billed the taxpayer for it. I arrived in London. It was very late. I was working on a speech I was to give in the next morning. She wanted orange juice, right? And here's the Duffy scandal. The RCMP investigated the Duffy scandal. Do you remember this? This was $90,000 given by Harper's chief of staff to Duffy to repay taxpayers, so it wouldn't be a problem, basically. And the RCMP got involved. 31 charges. Here it is. It's difficult to put a number on that because it's about public confidence in the integrity of criminal justice and political systems. They spent $1 million investigating this $90,000 bribe. Okay, this is like, I'm just trying to show you the difference between how big this scandal is comparatively and how much money was spent on vilifying Duffy and Wallen and there was another Patrick Brazo. I think that's his name. Here it is. Back to this anyway. Michaud said the force would not jeopardize its investigation of Duffy by talking about the reasoning behind its April decision to drop its investigation of Nigel Wright, Prime Minister Stephen Harper's former chief of staff. Wright gave Duffy a controversial $90,000 payment so Duffy could repay his questionable Senate housing expenses. Wright has said he intended to secure the repayment of taxpayer funds and that he believed his actions were lawful and in the public interest. The RCMP charged Duffy in July with 31 offenses, including 3 bribery charges related to the Wright payment. Prosecution begins Tuesday in an Ottawa courtroom. Duffy has denied any wrongdoing. And he was proven right. Here's the fallout from that. Duffy cleared of all charges, exonerates PMO under Harper. I don't think that's exactly... Okay, I didn't say that right. Anyway, so it's a bigger scandal ensnaring more MPs, including top MPs, PMO, and people outside the PMO, right? And including we, right? And we's family members and the lawyer, Victor Lee. So, I mean, like, this is a huge scandal compared to the $16 orange juice or the $90,000 housing expense crisis. And I understand there are differences too, but this is an interesting thing. Who knows? And we're in a minority government situation now too. So this has this is bigger than most of the scandals that have taken down most of the governments in the past decade. This is much bigger. Following SNC, following India, following Aga Khan, right? Like, this has not been a scandal-free leadership tenure from Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. So it is a very interesting situation when we are looking at an NDP, Bloc Québécois, and a Liberal government that is not looking at, I don't know about bringing down the government, but realigning? I don't know. And are the Liberal caucus not going to look at their leader for these ethics breaches? Are they not going to look at who's turning a blind eye to this? The Prime Minister should have known what the Finance Minister was doing, especially because the Prime Minister works so closely with we. There's a lot here. And like I said, it's easy to understand, and it keeps getting bigger, ensnaring more people. Somebody was saying on Twitter, should Poilievre ask the Miss McKenna to come in and see if anybody donated to we from her offices? I'd be interested to hear the answers to that too. Okay, finishing off and moving into some other stories, just to finish things off here. This one I thought was kind of funny. Here's Global News saying there have been hundreds of flights with possible exposures, but government and health officials say air travel is relatively low risk. And this is at least 561 flights in Canada have possible coronavirus exposures. So flying is fine, but if you go out in public, wear a mask, and the total destruction of our economy and the continued possible lockdown of our economy is just fine to risk. Let's keep landing those flights. When the government is so inconsistent, it's hard to take anything seriously. It's hard to believe them. Mandatory masks, but you continue to, oh no, flying's fine. It's okay. No problems. Here is moving into glory holes because, that's part of the Canadian government politics vernacular these days. YouPorn has reached out to BC to donate $100,000 to building glory holes. Naturally, the next step in BC's path to having the most glory holes per capita is partnering with a porn site to fund them. In behalf of all British Columbia, thank you, YouPorn, for most generous offer of $100,000. I expect the bidding process to be fierce. And it's just a letter from YouTube or YouPorn talking about how, they would value. So they would like to offer the province of British Columbia a grant of $100,000 to support the building of glory holes around the province. Make no mistake, that's a joke, right? Like, at our expense. Here is data was used to collect swing ridings data to target swing ridings in the 2015 federal election, according to unverified accounts. And this is a 2-minute clip that will verify that, or is the source for that claim. And the last story for today, and sorry, my mouse is just acting up. I apologize. The last story for today is from the National Post. Liberals to hike pay for 10,000 bureaucrats even as federal deficit continues to swell. It's a drop in the bucket, right? It used to be when we had a $20 billion deficit, adding $10 billion to that deficit looks like a big number. But when you have a $300 billion deficit, $10 billion doesn't matter, right? Or $11 billion or $12 billion, doesn't matter. $13 billion, $50 billion. It doesn't really matter. Look at Ontario's debt, right? Ontario's debt is $350, $360 billion, right? And now Canada's debt is matching that, so that's not good. And if you look at the total debt, because there is one taxpayer, you and me, it's not different taxpayers in Ontario and federally for Canada, it's one taxpayer. So if you add up all that debt, it's difficult to believe that that'll be easy to get out of without some kind of tax reform, and that means increased taxes. Or some changes, right? Oh, back to 8% GST, right? So 15% tax or more, right? There are places in Canada that are 18% on general service taxes, right? Out east. So there are ways to excise, and I mean the equity tax that they were talking about, and then the question that Finance Minister Morneau answered explicitly no, right, is that they weren't looking at this. But I mean, they're batting around ideas on how to pay for all this spending. And make no mistake, when government debts swell like this, you do have to pay the debt at some point. And well, I'm glad the municipalities are usually the first pinch point, right? But we've been seeing increasing property taxes, increasing municipal taxes, and similar services, not expanding services, because of how much social programs take up, right? And I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because you can't, in the current political climate, you can't have a dissenting opinion. You're not allowed to even question spending if it's for the public good. If it's for the greater good, you're not allowed to say, hey, wait a second, is this the right way to do this? In Guelph, for example, the numbers after instituting the safe injection site, the number of deaths has skyrocketed. What's going on? If you look at that, and if you look at that from a scientific point of view, you would say an increase in safe injection site resulted in an increase in death, and therefore maybe we should look at the safe injection site. But they're not doing that kind of stuff. They're just saying, well, I guess we're not throwing enough money at this. I guess we need more needles. It's an insane way to solve problems. It has absolutely nothing to do with reality. And when you can't dissent, when you can't say this is a bad idea, maybe we should look at this, maybe we should talk about this, maybe we should unpeel this onion, you get silenced or shut down or ignored. What do? How do you fight it? Right? And then, well, then that's a whole other issue, I suppose. So this scandal is big, getting back into the politics of it all. And in the midst of this big scandal, the government is making sure that 10,000 bureaucrats get a raise. Take that for what it is on its face. There's no 5D chess being played here. This is an obvious tit for tat, in my opinion. And, well, it's part of the reason that you can't dissent. Your ideas have to match exactly with this guy's, even though he's ethically corrupt, even though his entire cabinet is ethically corrupt, even though it's very clear that the scandals he's overseen far eclipse any scandals we saw during the Harper era, and really during the Martin era too. And so it's very, very interesting how these liberals are claiming the moral high ground on everything, regardless of the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is this is a merry band of people who continue to flagrantly break the laws that they themselves should be prioritizing, but they're not. And that bears wondering about, that bears questioning, but we're not allowed. And that bears talking about too. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I just finished one with Greg, and I just posted it just before I started doing my show here. So if you want to hear more from me, we talk about mandatory masks, we talk about glory holes, and we talk about Eskimos. So if you're interested in those three things, go check it out. And Eskimos like the Edmonton Eskimos, or sorry, the Edmonton NFL team. NFL CFL team. No Edmonton NFL team. I don't watch football. Come on. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.